Welcome to Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association. I'm Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark. And like you, I'm a professional speaker and I love listening to Speakernomics. Speakernomics is a professional speaker show that will help you thrive and grow a speaking business so you too can change the world, one keynote session workshop and speech at a time. And on this episode, well, this is the third part of a four-part series, if you will, with guests speaking about speaking internationally. We went all over the globe again for this one with a lot of amazing speakers and their global points of view. Now, to all my speaking friends, let's say you want to target certain countries and markets. There's plenty to think about that exists more than just what's on the map. What about the local cultures and audiences who may not have a clue who your favorite football team is, even when they're thinking about a different kind of football? But it's an important consideration, whatever area you target, because it often requires a specific kind of arrow, and the bullseye, well, that may be a different looking altogether as well, wherever you go. In part 3, then, we'll ask some global speaking experts, what does it take to be a successful international speaker when targeting specific markets and adapting to their cultures, and how we can connect best with them, the local audiences. Let's dive in then with the perspectives of speakers all over the world who've seen what works and what does not. And hopefully some of their insights will help you take a new look on what it takes to become a better international speaker. Let me remind you too that if you're not following their voices on the audio version, then make sure to check out NSA's YouTube channel to watch the video version of the show there. The experts that we're showcasing today, all 9 of them in order of appearance, include US-based Sylvie De Giusto, New Zealand's Elias Canaris, the UK's Lavelle de Vincenzi, Singapore's David Lim, South Africa's Joni Petty, Germany's Rainer Pettick, Sweden's Antony Lastenai, Mexico's Jesus Tobias, and closing out is US-based Alan Berg. And before we jump in, make sure to go to Speakernomics.com. That's where you can find the tips, insights, and knowledge to help you become a better speaker, build a better business, and get paid to speak. Now, let's learn from some special people, and then I'll see you on the other side with some takeaways. Sylvie, let's say that one of your favorite countries was Australia. How would you today go about positioning yourself specifically to that country? Or you could use any example, but make it a little more tactical in how you would be specific about targeting a specific country.
I would research, and then more research before I would even consider to position myself in that region or in that country. I would look into their current economic priorities. What are actually their current business challenges? Can I even help them? What are the industries growing in that country? What are their emerging trends? What are the cultural norms and preferences there? What is the political situation there? I would research their government. I would research any policy influences. I would also research my competitive landscape, meaning who is already there, who speaks about a similar topic like I am. And I would research the audience expectations in terms of presentation style and audience engagement. I am not a good fit with my style for all audiences around the world, hence I'm not a good fit for all buyers around the world. And something that many underestimate, I would also research the logistical considerations. I mean, Australia sounds amazing, right? I want to speak in Australia. In fact, I just had a request from Australia. And then we calculated it through how long it takes me from Tampa to get to Melbourne. And it turned out for my US fee that they were willing to pay, it would take me 5 days to get there, to adjust, to present, and come back. And I think we very often forget about that. And so even before you want to attack a country and position yourself, don't forget to consider if that is actually doable in your current environment, because I have family, I have children, and beyond the financial implications, I just have to think through, do I want to give up 5 days for one speaking engagement?
And then you got to do a walkabout through the Australian desert just to get to the
Yes.
venue because Uber's not around. Elise, how much of your events, percentage wise, as a guess, are in New Zealand as opposed to the rest of the world?
Well, at the moment, I'm doing a lot more in New Zealand. Post-COVID, I started to work locally. I would say that if I look at the overall spread, probably about 25% of my business historically has been New Zealand based versus 75% overseas. You can find much better paid opportunities to go and speak overseas, but you've got to choose them carefully. If you're going to go out there, remember, if you leave New Zealand, everything is at least a day away. So you're going to have at least a 12-hour flight to get to the west coast of the US. You're going to have to spend 24 hours to get into Europe. So you want to make sure that when you go there, you're going to invest a little bit more time to not just go there, see the hotel, the inside of an airport, and a metal tube is going to deliver you there and bring you back. But have a bit more time to get to know the locals, get to understand and explore that. So for me, the opportunity I'm now looking for are probably smaller in number, but higher in quality, where I'm going to now get to choose where I want to go. And I'm actually using a rather peculiar criteria. I'm asking my wife, where does she want to go on vacation? Because if I can go on vacation with her and we can get some good paid fees to go and speak at an event at a place that she wants to come to.
Good to know that happy wife, happy life is a universal metaphor. Lavelda, you're based in the UK, but when you think about countries where you want to target, what do you do to specifically target a country and go after a market, if you will, for you to get more speaking opportunities or MC work or whatever it is?
I've very much built my speaking business off relationships. So rather than going in cold and doing a lot of cold pitching, that's not really my style. I'm not completely anti it. It's just not something that really works for me. And I found that typically speaking, the best gigs I've ever gotten have come from relationships or word of mouth. And so my starting point tends to be first looking inward in my network. Who do I already know who's based in different countries? And I'm blessed to know a lot of speakers, moderators, hosts, bureaus, agents who are based all over the world. And so I would probably just start with a list. I would write a list of the people that are already in my network, and I'd start calling around and, get my ear to the ground and let them know I'm on my way, I'm coming. How does it work? What's the best way in? Is there different cultural expectations? Those sorts of things so that I could understand it. And once I've got the first one, I would actually be willing to, if it's a market that is super important to me, I've tended to find that the most important engagement is sometimes the first one. And once you're in and that community can experience you, that market can experience you, it's easier to open doors. Being on the outside, trying to get in can be a lot harder because it's kind of like the way I've grown my moderating business. When I first started, it wasn't easy to get a corporate engagement at all. I'm this new person. Nobody knows who the heck you are. It doesn't matter how great you tell people that you are, you're selling your services. So of course you're going to say you're great. I don't know anybody selling who says, oh, give me a shot. I'll see what I can do. It's just not how we sell. We say, I'm going to knock it out of the park. You can trust me. But you don't have enough trust credentials yet. But once you've got that first one, you're able to say, well, I've done it for others like you before. I've spoken in other countries before. I've spoken to audiences that were mixed before. I've spoken to large corporates. I've spoken to people from different industries and sectors. And so I would be prepared to not be so attached to pushing the same. If it's a market I want to get into, I'd probably be willing to how do I say this? Start from the beginning rather than jump in where I am right now. And what I mean by that is I wouldn't assume if I really want to get in, do I need to get my full fee or do I need to get in the door? Which of those two is most important? Because once I'm there and you see me, now we're talking.
David, how do you go about looking though and positioning yourself country specific? Let's say that you're looking for you're in Singapore, but if you're looking at more opportunities in Japan or South Korea or somewhere in that part of the world, how do you go about looking at targeting and being country specific?
All right, I would say one thing though, and if you take a look at where I spend most of my time now, I've had gigs in Europe and the US, but I would say they are fairly few and far between. Most of my business is in Asia Pacific, within like a 6 to 7 hour
Right.
flight, and it's simple. It's a simple reason. If somebody really wants you for a very specific and a special reason, if they want to fly you halfway around the world to deliver your content, so most of the people within constraints of budgets, will find it's quite reasonable and affordable to get someone within a 6 to 7 hour flight to fly to the event. Now, in this podcast, I'm assuming I'm largely speaking to a largely Anglo-centric audience, English-speaking audience, and you're probably hopefully going to deliver largely in English. As a result of that, right, people tend to gravitate to countries which basically are run mostly in English. We're talking about, to some extent, Hong Kong, to a very, very, very large extent, Singapore, partly Malaysia, maybe. But outside of these countries here, you can probably expect to go there to deliver your content in English simply because the meeting happens to be held in Bali, Tokyo, Shanghai, for example, because it's highly unlikely that a homegrown company in vernacular countries like Taiwan and Hong Kong will want an English-speaking speaker. They will probably want somebody speaking in their own particular audience. So the thing about it is that I think your market will be multinational countries who happen to have a meeting somewhere in that country. So I want you to maybe shift your minds away from, I just want to speak in that particular country. More to do that, find out which multinationals have a strong presence in that country, and then try and work towards that. So if you have a speaking engagement in the United States, and you know this large multinational has fairly active and large offices, not 1 or 2 person type of office, but very large offices in countries in, say, Asia, you want to ask them, are similar sales kickoffs meetings, for example, being held in Shanghai, in your Singapore office, for example. And that's the way you can get recommendations to those offices who themselves may be holding those kind of similar kickoffs around that same time and looking for a kind of a speaker. But admittedly, it had to be a fairly significant budget to get you over from far away to that particular country in that place. But yes, generally speaking, unless you can speak that particular vernacular language, by and large, most of the international speaking engagements from multinationals will be in English, sometimes with simultaneous translations, which will have its own challenges for your content. I hope that answers that part of the question.
Absolutely. Kenneth. David, how do you go about making certain that you connect culturally with audiences? Now, maybe you are doing this in English, but you were talking about doing it in a 6 to 7 hour, type flights from Singapore. Every place has got a unique culture, if you will. There's things that bond us, obviously, but you do have to make a connection with an audience. And a lot of times those audiences culturally can be much different.
Okay. So 9 out of 10 times, Kenneth, my buyer is a senior line manager, typically either a CXO or an SVP, a senior vice president, who is partly or wholly responsible for a single or a multi-day meeting somewhere in Asia. All right, so that's my typical buyer, and the audience can usually be from 10 different countries. But I guarantee you one thing: a very important question to ask would be, to what extent are the people coming, the bulk of the people coming from 1 or 2 countries? And here's the reason why. Generally speaking, if everyone understands English for the audience, or maybe they will be adding simultaneous translation for people who are more comfortable listening to the session being delivered in their own language, I would say this, that some of the toughest audiences where translations are concerned are what I call the North Asia audiences, typically Korea, Japan, big chunks of China. And that's because the English is not usually there. They're not strong in that language, even, and at the best, it's a second language to them. In that particular instance, one definitely thing you could do is probably you could remove about 10 to 15% of your content so that you can slow down.
Great point.
Let the simultaneous translators catch up. And not only that, metaphors, examples, people who are so used to analogies that are commonplace in America, well, those won't work in Asia. I'll give you an example. We had this great speaker who spoke on mental wellness. This was many years ago. He was an Asian American and a terrific speaker. But for the first 20 minutes, people didn't quite know where he was going in his session. Then he recovered and he had a fantastic remainder, I think 30, 40 minutes. Here's the reason why. For the first 20 minutes, he was using almost nothing but American football analogies. I mean, I'm sorry about that, but the game of football, or soccer as you call it in the United States, that's the global game, not American football. So it's a bit like if you were speaking using cricket analogies, you would probably resonate maybe with Australian, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and all those countries from the Commonwealth that play cricket, but you wouldn't resonate with an American, an audience from the United States. So there's a couple of things, some heads up, right? Slow down. Give time for any simultaneous translations happening to catch up. Try and use more universal metaphors, examples, and stories. And if there's a lot of humor in your program, relook that, because humor is very, very difficult to translate. So I will say that. But if the audience is a little bit more universal, Asia Pacific, that means strong component of English speakers, people in the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, just probably do most of what you're doing, but maybe you want to take the pedal off a lot of very US or American centric examples or stories.
Joni, how do you go about then connecting with an audience, especially one that's in, say, the Middle East or Australia or Singapore? I mean, you're from South Africa. People are people all over the world, but to the same thing, and we were still trying to connect to our audiences, regardless of whether they're in one country 10,000 miles away or an audience that's next door, and people are different yet the same. So how do you go about making those connections with people that are thousands of miles away that maybe aren't familiar with all the culture inside South Africa and what makes you you?
Yeah, good question, Shark. If it's in person, I will go earlier and I'll really get to understand the pain points of that particular organization. So I will never go and do open programs, in one industry sector for many organizations. So I'll go and find out the pain points of that organization and then never make assumptions. You're in Abu Dhabi, not everybody is an Arab. So actually, the organizations that I've worked with in Abu Dhabi have got many Europeans, some Americans, some Jordanians. So it's really a melting pot and very experienced people who have a number of degrees. And therefore, in relating to that audience, you've really got to know that you've got to relate probably at their academic level and intrigue them and hook them in. And it's not so much one culture, but it's really this fantastic melting pot of many cultures. So going early before a convention and spending time in the organization, perhaps beforehand doing online interviews, but deep research is absolutely needed. Otherwise, you won't make that connection.
Reiner, how do you go about connecting with audiences who obviously have cultural differences? I mean, it depends if you're in a neighboring country. Obviously, a lot of them will have an understanding of German culture, and Europe is obviously much more in tune with each other's cultures. But there are a lot of countries, even in Europe, who don't identify well with Germans, just like Americans who don't speak Spanish don't do well in Mexico. I mean, there's some symbiosis, but at the same time, it's hard to identify for a lot of people culturally with audiences who are listening to you giving a keynote or presentation.
Yeah, definitely. There are two things. First of all, it's a little bit of the necessity to be humble. It's about humility. That means also I do a lot of jokes about being an Austrian living in Germany and all the stuff. So this is one thing you can do. On the other hand, I'm a mountaineer. And I talk about adventures in nature, and they are understood across all cultures. So this is something I put on the table. This helps me a lot because more or less the things I am talking about are universal truths for humankind, universal truths for different cultures about dealing with challenges, dealing with risk, dealing with Yeah, uh, whatever circumstances you can meet, and the third part is, of course, when you think about how should the audience transfer the lessons from mountain climbing to their specific business context. It's important to do some research about their business, about what to do or what not to do in that specific culture, and take that into account as well. So this is more or less what I do in order to overcome the cultural obstacles.
Anthony, how do you go about thinking about country to country, especially with the cultural differences? I mean, obviously, you talked about Sweden, Norway, Finland, that sort of regional aspect to it. But for example, the culture in France and Spain and Italy, much different, or Eastern Europe, or any of those, or whether or not it's the US. I mean, there's so many different cultures here as well. And that's the same way around the world, but they want to almost feel like you're one of them locally, if you will, with colloquial type phrasing, as we say, that make them feel that connection.
Well, first of all, I do my research. I want to find out more about that country and what's going on in that country. And also, when it comes to my topics then about employee engagement and communication and so on, what's the stats in that particular region? So I do that. But then I focus more on similarities rather than the differences. What I speak about is deeply human. We want to be respected. We want to contribute. We want to belong. We want to be praised for doing good things and so on. So those are the same wherever you go. And then I do realize that there are different ways of, for instance, leading people. Like when I was in Eastern Europe not too long ago, I know they have more of a command and control style. I get that. And the conversation was really strange because I said I wanted to focus on how we can get people really engaged. And they said, we already have that engagement thing worked out. Now it's about getting shit done, and more like very direct. And I said, well, I understand what you're saying, but if you want to get shit done, you better have engaged people. The more you can make people want to do work instead of have to do work, then it's going to be a better and sustainable result. So I still focus on the similarities, but I do have a curiosity again. I want to find out what's happening in that market. And if I can reference it, it's much easier. Just simple things like I was doing a webinar for the Mumbai region in India. Of course, I wanted to find out what's happening in India at that time and giving a couple of reference to it and how that could perhaps influence the workplace and so on. So, and it's appreciated. People appreciate it when you make an effort.
Jesus, how do you go about being country specific in your targeting? I know when you and I had spoken before, you said that most of your business comes from Mexico, but when you start looking out towards the United States, for example, as a target market, and again, you have a universal theme with happiness, but how do you specifically go after the US differently than, say, you would Colombia or Brazil or England or anywhere else?
Well, at the beginning, the companies and the universities used to ask me to go their countries to share my information about creativity, how to start a company or whatever. Now what I do is every time I go to a new country, a new place for vacation or for any reason, I call in advance to the associations and companies that may be interested in my speech, mainly in Spanish. Obviously, if they want it in English, I will do it too. But I call to all those places. I'm going to be there anywhere, and they realize that they are going not to pay anything, no travel expenses. Even I give them for free, just to know my work, to know my lecture, and later on they are going to start recommending my lecture to other companies in the same country. So every time you go to a new place, give for free your speeches. Don't ask for travel expenses. Don't ask for anything. Just let them know what you have to offer, is what I do.
Alan, when you think about speaking internationally, especially if you're looking at other countries, whether it's a Spanish speaking or French or whatever it is, wherever you target your niche industry, how do you go about making that targeting help you make your content more culturally significant to that audience where you want to speak?
It's a great question. A mistake I made when I first was doing this is I would take the same keynote or PowerPoint presentation and I would use it because I was in an English speaking country. So I'm in Ireland or I'm in the UK. Let's just use these slides. And I speak in the about the business of weddings and events. So I speak about sales. And here we talk about getting an inquiry, right? Which is fine. INQU, an inquiry. And I showed this same slide over there. And somebody said to me afterwards, we know what you mean. But an inquiry here with an I is a criminal investigation, whereas we get enquiries, ENQU. Lesson learned. So before I go anywhere, pretty much anywhere in the world, I just do a find and replace in my slides to INQ to ENQ. It's fixed that. If there's an example of a phone number, I will look up how phone numbers are written in that country, and I'll put that in so that they'll see that. What I've learned recently a couple of times the hard way is cultural references. Now, the funny thing is, the first time I spoke what I would consider international, not U.S., not Canada and Mexico, because to me that's our attic and our basement, right? So, but I was going to Barbados, and I removed all the cultural references from my presentation. I get down there, get in my hotel room, turn the TV on in Barbados, and it's showing the New York City, where I was from, the New York City TV station. And I'm thinking they don't know our cultural references. They knew all of our cultural references. But I've also had where music. So I spoke last year actually at the PSA UKI. So it's like the NSA of the UK. And I was doing something with music, and I reached out to a bunch of people ahead of time, said, "Are you familiar with these songs? Do you know what these songs are?" Because I've had it where something that just, no, crickets. There was a song called "You Down with OPP," right? It was a hip hop song. Well, I did a presentation, Are You Down with OPP, which is obsessively pricing for profits, right? And I was speaking at a DJ conference, easy. What was my walk-on music? You Down with OPP, right? I get on stage, 1,000 people, and I told the DJ, I said, I'm going to signal you to stop, right? So he plays it, he stops, I wait a beat, and I said to the audience, you down with OPP? And 1,000 people went, yeah, you know me, right? Went to a caterer conference in the States, did the same thing, got the call back. I go to Ireland. I said to the DJ, do you have this song? He goes, yeah. I walk up, plays the song, stops. I said, you down with OPP? You could have heard a pin drop in the room. So from that point on, if I'm going someplace, I'm going to ask, I'm going to know, how old are these people, right? Are they going to know that song from the 90s, I guess? Right? Are they going to know that song? So I'm looking at those type of things, watching for the cultural references, reaching out to locals if I'm at all concerned about a phrasing. Like I was using that example of Wendy's hamburgers. Well, then I go to India. They don't eat hamburgers, right? Burger King sells chicken Whoppers, right? McDonald's sells chicken sandwiches. They don't sell hamburgers there. Well, am I going to use this example of Wendy's, right? Well, they don't have Wendy's. No. So watching for things like that. And then one of the best pieces of advice I got, I don't know if any of your other guests have mentioned this, the book called Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands, right? I'm sure everybody's probably mentioned that because everybody in SA tells everybody else to get that book. And it gives you a little bit of a history. You have some understanding there. I stay away from politics everywhere, politics and religion, but it's good to understand the religions of the places that you're going. So that's a great thing to do. And then certainly sign up for the U.S. State Department notifications before you go to know about any instability that you might run into.
Let's do a quick recap then based on their expert international advice. Number one, do deep research before entering any new country. Nearly every speaker emphasized the importance of customizing content and approach based on thorough research of the target country. That includes economic priorities, cultural norms and missteps to avoid, audience expectations, as well as logistics before committing to international work. You got to stop and ask, is it worth to commit to that kind of time away, even if they agree to your fee? Think about the commitment of time it takes to get there, and not just the time on stage. Number two, building relationships. Just like when it's local, it will help you get inside markets and build credibility. Jesus even occasionally offers free talks when visiting a new country to build word of mouth and get his foot in the door. That's opened some doors for him. And like Lavelle Demon said, once you've got that first one, you're able to say, well, I've done it for others like you before. Number 3, cultural connection is everything, including the language, tone, stories, humor. Consider adapting your tone, content, references based on regional differences. David recommended even removing a smallish percentage just so the rest of the audience who may not speak the same language can get caught up and not get lost in the speed of translation. Several of them also recommended looking less at local idioms and more at universal themes for your content. Friends, make sure to join us at Speakernomics.com and let your voice be heard. I'm Kenneth Shark Kinney, your host of the National Speakers Association's podcast, Speakernomics, and this has been another fantastic and international episode of the show. Sasifaristo, Danka, Shishing, Danyavadalo, and thank you for the privilege of your time. And remember, Speakernomics is a podcast where you'll learn to speak, get paid, repeat.